Doing great.
Happy to be here. Well, thank you so much. When Lydia called me, gosh, I think it was back in February, perhaps, then maybe beginning of March, I was delighted and honored to be given the opportunity to chat with you all. Can everybody understand me and hear me? Do I need to speak up? If I do, and it's not clear what I'm saying, please just raise your hand and I'd be happy to project. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, so just a little bit about me. I like introducing myself and a little bit about where I've come from. I live currently outside of Philadelphia with my husband and my 3 kids. We grew up in that area, lived in New York City while he went to seminary because he too is an Episcopal priest and a rector. We lived in Connecticut for a couple of years, and then we've recently moved back, I guess about 3 years ago, to the Philly area again. I've most recently, I've been a consultant for about 7 years doing church-wide strategic planning, especially in the areas of children's, youth, and family ministries. And so that's just a little bit about what I've done. And on April 3rd, I started my new role as Senior Program Director for Leadership at Episcopal Church Foundation. And so I travel to New York City and work there 3 days out of the week. It's quite a commute, but it's something I love to do. The work is just fantastic. So that's just a little bit about me. We've got 3 kids. My eldest daughter is graduating this year and headed to Boston Conservatory of Berkeley. The middle one is just crazy and she loves dyeing her hair all sorts of crazy colors. The youngest one will be 12 in June. It's June. He'll be 12 in this month. And then these are my 2 little pride and joys. The chocolate lab in the background is my girl Reese. And that parrot on my stomach, his name's Mars. And strangely enough, the 2 of them get along. It's kind of crazy. And we love taking cruises. So that family picture is on a boat, and we're going on a cruise again this summer. Looking forward to it. Okay, so I always like starting off with some statistics. Where are we at? The median average for Sunday worship attendance is 76 people on any given Sunday. So I'm just curious, who here is above the average worship attendance? Raise your hand in the church. Who's below? Okay, so we're dealing with small church, rural church, kind of Iowa churches, correct?
That's right.
What is the average Sunday attendance at your churches?
8 to 14.
55, 56.
55, 56, how many?
8 to 14.
8 to 14, so we have family size, we've got pastoral sizes.
There's only 2 churches.
Great, okay, perfect. Good for me, that's good for me to understand where we're at. 90% of churches have less than 300 members in them. 1% of churches have 1,000 plus members in them. 18% of Americans say they're in church on any Sunday. Wow. That's small, right? Now here's 25.4% get primary spiritual nourishment. I think that's 78%, y'all. That's not 18%. I think that's a typo somehow. My bad. I'm pretty sure that's 78 because it conflicts with something. It conflicts with something. It's 78%. 25.4% get primary spiritual nourishment from small groups. Keep that in mind. The average youth ministry on any given Sunday in America today is 7 to 8 youth. The average children's ministry is 12 children. Now here's something you should understand. This doesn't mean youth group and it doesn't mean Sunday school. It means in any way, shape, or form they're plugged into the life of your church. So if you have children who are coming to church and worshiping with you but don't go to Sunday school, or you have youth who are acolyting but don't go to youth group, they count in this, okay? 3,500 to 4,000 churches close every year, and only 1,100 to 1,500 open. 42% say they're regular church attenders. Now, isn't that interesting? 78%, and that's real. This is from the National Council of Churches, and that is indeed a typo. 78% of Americans say they're in church on any given Sunday. However, only 42% say they're regular church attenders. That's a big difference, right? So the perspective or the perception of people who call themselves faithful varies widely from person to person about what that actually means. And last but not least, regular church attendance now means 1 to 2 times a month, no longer 3 to 4 times a month. Okay, so I just like starting, like throwing that out there, just to say, okay, here's where we're at. Yes.
What church are you talking about?
The church in America. I'm not talking about the Episcopal Church.
Okay.
The Episcopal Church is a little lower on the average Sunday, like I think instead of 76, I think it might be now 72, which, good news, I think just 4 years ago it was 69. And so Episcopal Church attendance is on the rise a little bit. And who knows, after the royal wedding, it might even go up more. Right? We'll see. So what I would love for you to do is turn and discuss at your table. What challenges or challenges are your church facing in attracting families with children and youth? Turn and discuss. Table to share one or two. What are some of the challenges that many of y'all are facing?
We need more kids.
We need more kids.
To expand on that, we talked a little bit about the challenge of, like you said, the regular attendance. So sometimes a young family will come, once, maybe twice a month, and then when you have maybe, we have 4 or 5 young families, but if they, if they're kind of spread out, then when a visiting young family comes, they're like, oh, there's like 3 kids here.
Yeah. So critical mass.
Critical mass.
Critical
that's
mass is a thing for sure. What else?
Yeah,
Yes.
and once you lose that critical mass, it's extremely difficult to build it back up. Because now you're trying to attract families with young kids when you don't have any.
Yeah. Building critical mass. Here's the thing. It is very difficult, and it's not impossible.
We
Okay.
talked about competition
Oh,
with other
yeah.
churches.
Sunday
And,
morning.
and I think our community is always growing, there's always families coming in, and there's a lot of retired people here too.
Sure.
But we have a lot of competition, and the Episcopal Church in the Midwest is kind of a
Yeah.
Episcopal what?
And not only do you compete against other churches, but you're competing against sports. You're competing against, all of those other busy things that folks are accustomed to doing. Or just sleeping in because they're exhausted from
Yeah,
their
right.
busy lives during the week.
Well, we've had trouble even in a large church with scheduling because people, if we have Sunday school before church and then church, people don't want to stay for both because
That's right.
that's 2.5,
That's
3
right.
hours out of their morning.
Yep.
And yet, if you have Sunday school during church, then teachers don't want to teach. It's harder
Yeah.
to recruit help.
It's true.
And so we've been experimenting with moving off Sunday for a lot of our activities for kids and even the education format. But finding the right date for that is difficult too. I mean,
Yeah.
it used to be, at least in Iowa, that you could say Wednesday night and schools weren't doing anything, but it's true anymore.
Sure.
And so we're still negotiating some of that. But
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about that. Last but not least.
Okay,
One
well, we
more.
didn't talk about this at our table, but I've talked about it before, so sorry, wild card. But we have things happening and new beginnings, but our church is so far away from any of that. It's hard for our students, even when there were more students, to get to those events.
Yeah.
Or to really be connected with other youth, and in that way, be connected to other youth in the diocese.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, kids meet each other at those things, and then they become friends.
Yeah.
And they go to happening again,
Great. Great example. So, who here feels stuck? Stuck. Well, you probably don't feel as stuck as this person.
That's awesome.
How does that happen?
That's like a soda can that was.
And I can probably guarantee that you don't feel as stuck as this little guy. Bless his heart. How does that even happen?
When was that you when you were little?
So oftentimes,
That's right.
here's why I like talking about challenges. Challenges are real. Challenges need to be named and they need to be faced. We just have to figure out how to use them as opportunities to learn, grow, and move in, through, and around them. That's all a challenge really is. And so oftentimes, before we can face a challenge, many people will lament. And we're going to talk about some of those lamentations. And the word but gets in the way a lot of times. So just take a look at this.
I got a big butt. It's gigantic, if I'm gonna be blunt about it. And you know what? The funny thing is, I got several big butts. And before you discard me or wince at the disgusting notion of that, I'm gonna go out on a limb here and suggest that possibly you have at least one big butt as well. Yeah, you like that? Hurts a little, huh? Let me tell you something. Let me just tell you something, okay? Everybody we know has a big butt. And more often than not, it's the thing that actually gets in the way of us living a consistent life for Jesus. Yeah, I think you know what I'm talking about. But I'm going to expound a little bit, okay? See if you can recognize some of these butts. But I have to work more. But my favorite TV show is on. But my kids have practice. But I got to tweet something. But it's such a beautiful day. But I'm just not in the mood. But I deserve a break today. You see, everything kind of interferes with my life of just living an authentic life for God, okay? And more often than not, it always has something to do with some sort of butt, okay? Even the littlest of butt can distract me. It really can. The littlest butt can make me think, I'm not going to pray today. I'm not going to think about it today. I'm not going to deny myself. I'm not going to read the Bible, blah, blah, blah. Whatever God asks me to do, I seem to have a butt for it and get away, okay? And the most horrendously big butt of all time is the butt that gets in the way of me just hanging out with God and reading His Word. It's true. Think about it. All the times you're about to open that, and all of a sudden a big giant butt gets in the way. A butt. Much like one of these. But I got a farm bill, but I'm tired, but the game's over, but I read last Tuesday, but I gotta check Facebook, but I don't like Leviticus, but it's too hot in here, but I just don't like books, but I don't understand it, but it's boring. But what does that have to do with me in the 21st century? Those are some ugly butts, people. Let's just call them what they are, ugly. Ugly butts. Okay? And there's a lot more to them, sad but true. Here's a list, although not exhaustive, of some of the most popular butts known to mankind. But I don't have enough money yet. But others will think that I'm a nerd if I carry the Bible. But they won't like me if I talk about Jesus. But I don't know if God will do what I ask. But I just can't get motivated. But I'm afraid. But I don't have all the answers. But the small group is the same night as Monday Night Football. But can't I just let my life speak for itself? But I'm not happy. That's not my gift. That's the pastor job. But I don't know how to pray. But I can't believe that. But I don't know where to start. But everybody else is having fun. Butts abound, friend. Butt. Here a butt, there a butt, everywhere a butt. Okay? And the most overused butt of all time, but I just don't have enough time. Really? Oh, come on. We have a lot of butts. God has given us a real simple word. Okay? If we learn it, and we share it, and we teach it, and we live by it, then see, God gets glorified, people benefit, and then we get blessed. That's why we do what we do. That's the why behind the butt. Okay? And ultimately, that's the whole point I'm trying to make here, my fellow butt lovers, is if your butt is bigger than your why, then your butt's too big. Okay, it's time to, metaphorically speaking, snap into a Slim Jim. Okay, let's slap on some spiritual shape-ups and hit the road a little bit so we can just manage the butts a little bit. That's all we're trying to do. That's what we're talking about. Let's minimize the excuses. Let's shrink the butts. Shrink the butts. Say it with me. Shrink the butts. That's what we need to do. And you and I can do that together. We can conquer this. You and I can do it. We start today, okay? I know we can. Let's just do it. No ifs, ands, or... Yeah. Now you get it.
Sometimes in churches, our butts will actually project onto other people. We make excuses for ourselves and say things like, but they don't come, or they're too busy. And so what I would love for y'all to do is, again, turn to your table and talk about what are some of the butts that your churches may use, or you personally might use, that are getting in the way of attracting families with children and youth to your church. Just curious. Just for 3 minutes, have a table conversation. What are the butts that are getting in the way of attracting families and children with youth at your church?
That's exactly what we've never done that before. I'm watching this and I'm thinking, this is not what you got after me.
I feel it's hard.
But this is in real life today. This is how we process information. It's catchy, it's familiar to them from other videos that they watch. Instead of feeding some of this into our body and culture that's in our curriculum or whatever, and then we realize we're not stuffy church meals all the time.
It would be nice to have a teacher that they love.
I mean, yeah,
Who is that?
you know what I mean? We're
But it's not me. I'm not very good. I'm a nuts and bolts guy. I'll take care of the church.
ministry to our life,
I see that as
sure, our life, we have a sermon, or actually a talk,
families.
so that other meetings follow the church schedule, all that. But I think we also need to opportunities like this, you know, to just say, okay, but now let's bring it back to life.
Walk through.
Yeah.
One more minute.
Outside of the box, to recreate Sunday. But I've got so much going on.
Something like that, not necessarily, but.
Recovery. I'm married.
Okay, what are some of the buts that are getting in the way of attracting children and youth with their families at your church?
But we've always done it that way before and it didn't work.
Oh, but we've always done it that way. And I'm gonna say the inverse might be her too, but we've never done it that way before, right? So there's kind of a both and, right? What else? There's a little bit of energy. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't want to offend somebody because, well, I come from a place where we have a lot of varying religious groups around,
Oh,
and inviting somebody to church, you might actually step on their face,
okay,
but I don't want to offend anybody.
okay. So that butt might have gone in the way of evangelism, right? Yeah. What else?
But I'm working 2 jobs, sometimes 3, and I just don't have time.
That's right. Man, that's a legitimate one. Right? Any other butts?
But the average age of our church members is so much older, and so therefore, for one thing, we are tired, and we don't feel well, and we don't have the energy we used to do these things, and we need to focus time and energy on that population.
Okay, wow, that was a loaded butt. There's a lot to that, right? Lots of butts saying, well, but I've already done my time, right? But I'm really tired. Like, we need these parents to step up and do what we used to do, right? But what about us? What about the older folks who also need care and attention and nourishment, etc.? Lots of butts there, for sure. Okay. Well, a lot of butts will keep us stuck. If we're not able to get beyond the butt and start just living authentic lives that are true to our covenants and, the baptismal covenant and us as Episcopalians and trying to grow the Jesus movement, it's going to be difficult to get unstuck.
Whoa, that's not good.
Oh, I don't need this. I'm already late.
So let him come. Anybody out there?
Do you have a phone?
No. Sorry. Somebody! Hello? There are 2 people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something? I don't believe this. You gotta be kidding me.
I'm gonna cry.
Well, there's not enough left to do, is it?
Hello? Hey, don't worry about it. I'll fix it in a second.
He said he could fix it. All right. All right. That's more like it. He says he can fix it.
Yeah. So I'm curious, friends. There's so many parallels of this video to the way we approach church. if you think about it. There are so many amazing things that we have that others need, that may not even know they need it. And so for us to lament and use buts as excuses and to stay stuck is crazy, because we have an amazing message to share. And so we're going to be looking at that kind of stuff. But think about it. The next time you lament something and you feel like using an excuse, etc., remember this video. It's not easy work. Nobody said being a Christian and following a faithful life and being a Jesus follower was easy. But it is just a matter of getting off the escalator. So we have to choose to get unstuck. And the next thing is really what we're going to talk about, is some ways that you can do that. So everybody here obviously recognizes the importance of being able to not just attract. That's an actual word that I don't like using, and you'll find it funny. I used it in the headline on purpose. So understand that language matters. You want to make sure that you're not attracting people for the wrong reasons. So keep that in mind as we continue throughout this presentation. So the first key to attraction is to trust in the powerful message of the gospel and authentically share the love of Jesus. Friends, I'm going to repeat that. Trust in the powerful message of the gospel and authentically share the love of Jesus. We have a phenomenal message that this world desperately needs. So for us to just be sitting in our church and doing stuff in our church for one another, that's great. I'm not knocking that. That's super important. And we need to start, notice I didn't say but, and we need to start setting our sights out into the community, because there's still a whole heck of a lot of people who are hurting and are unchurched or dechurched, okay? The second thing is to reclaim and recommit to living into your baptismal covenant. This is super important, because I don't know if it's on page 302, you know, the baptismal rite, that baptism rite starts on page 299, and then 300 starts the magic liturgy, and then at page 301 or 302, don't quote me, something magical happens, and I'm not talking about the ontogeny or the crazy, like, you know, stuff that happens when the Spirit descends upon a baby who's being marked as Christ's own forever. And I'm not talking about the amazing 5 questions that you say, I will answer, I will with God's help. I'm talking about the one question who, in many churches, people remain seated. Others will stand and boldly claim it. The priest will turn to you and say, will all you witnessing this vow to support this person's life in Christ? Or some words like that.
We will.
And most people boldly say we will, right? Yes. It's a joyous, joyous thing. I suspect, though, that not many people actually think about what they're saying we will to. What does it look like to you to actually support another person's life in Christ? What does that mean? Have you thought about it? I was with a church outside of in Pennsylvania, and I was preaching. It was the week after the Lord's baptism. And so, you know, some lectionary, John the Baptist was in it, and I was doing visioning for their children's and youth ministry. And they asked me to guest preach, and I said, sure, why not? I preach to my husband all the time. I can do this. Well, it was a little scandalous, because I was talking about baptism. I was talking about living in community with one another and helping to make children and youth a vital part of the fabric of the church, not just that siloed group known as the kids. You know, that one-eared Mickey Mouse thing where you've got the head and that little tiny ear out there. I was talking about how to fully integrate children and youth into the life of the church. And so I was talking about this in the sermon, and I pulled out the prayer book, and I said, I would love for y'all to turn to page 302. I think it's 302. It might be 301. Anyway, I said, please turn to that page. And I said, I'd like you to practice something with me. And I asked everybody to stand up. And I said, so we're going to pretend that I'm the priest, and I'm going to turn to you and say, you're going to pretend that you know, one beautiful baby and another new adult member of the church have just been baptized. And the priest turns to you and says, will you support this person's life in Christ? And before you answer, I really want you to think about what that means. And if you actually mean it, and what that could look like for you. Because everybody's gonna do that differently. But what does that mean for you? So we're gonna do this right now. We're gonna practice, and I said it. All you here, you know, support these person's life in Christ, and everybody said we will. Now I said, now stop. Did you actually mean it? Or were you saying it because the person next to you said it? And so I paused for about 30 seconds. I said, I really want you to think about this, because at this point, I'm going to ask you one more time. And I want you to mean it. And if you can't mean it, don't say it. That's totally fine. Just stay silent. Will you support these person's life in Christ? And they boldly said, we will. And then I said, so for all of you who didn't actually mean it, or aren't necessarily sure what that's going to take, just have a seat. And not a single person sat down. It was the best volunteer recruitment exercise that anybody has done at that church. And you know, some people, one person came up to me and actually kind of complained. And he said, you know, that's kind of guilt, that was a shaming exercise. And I said, you know, sir, I said, I appreciate that. I said, I'm really sorry if you felt guilty or shamed by that. But perhaps it's the Holy Spirit convicting you. So I'm a little scandalous. I'll be the first to admit it. But sometimes guilt is indeed the Spirit moving in our hearts, and we just don't want to say yes. We don't like what the Spirit's saying to us. We need to reclaim and recommit into living into our baptismal covenant, friends, for the sake of our children and youth growing up in faith. If we do not, their faith will be hollow. The end. So that's really a commitment. It's a question that everybody should be wrestling with. The next time you do baptisms, clergy, think about it. Charge your folks. Tell them to think about it before they actually answer it. I know it's not, those little words aren't in the prayer book, but I don't know that you're not allowed to say a pause like we do in instructed Eucharists. Perhaps you take a moment and teach your folks what they're actually saying yes to. I don't know, is that scandalous, Bishop?
Sounds great.
All right. There you go. The next one is to confidently know how your congregation is indispensable within its community/neighborhood. Phrased another way, if your church was to close tomorrow, what would your community lament? Friends, we need to have a really good answer to this. And if we don't, let's get one. Any questions about that? Yes, Tom.
I struggle a little balancing out like Henry Nouwen's idea of relevancy, and you know, not like, I do think that we want to be able to offer something to the community that that would be missed if it wasn't there. But
Sure.
just sort of balancing like, I guess it all starts with the top one, you know, staying grounded in, you know, the why, not we're doing it because
That's right.
Yeah. All right, I talked myself through that.
I'm so glad, because I heard it. I just wanted to make sure. You're right. Your why is huge, right? And we don't exist just to worship God together in a little kind of community. It's more than that. We are called to go out and make disciples, right? Mm-hmm. So we need to be more than just a worshiping community. That in order to be actively engaged and being a part of the Jesus movement, we need to be doing the work outside the walls of the church.
So George Bailey and It's a Wonderful Life.
Yes.
That would be it. I wonder how that could.
Well, that sounds like it could preach.
Yeah.
For sure.
Because we don't know. In some senses, we don't know the answer to that question unless we want to jump off the bridge.
That's right. So you need to get the pulse of the community, which means you need to be in relationship with the community, right? Okay.
about. A big one for me is, but they probably already have their own church. Where in Iowa, people, you know, you're a Methodist, you're Episcopalian,
Sure.
you do your thing.
Yeah.
So confidently know how your congregation is indispensable. You know, I don't
Yeah.
know where those people go to church or the neighborhood people who live around here.
Yeah.
I'm done.
So that's a
but.
real concern, right? How do you know, if you're 100% of community or faithful people, church-going people, I'd suspect that you all wouldn't need to be having this conversation. I'm just saying. I feel like the Episcopal Church has so much to offer, and I feel like we have become a bit lethargic in the way we engage one another in evangelism type of conversations. That E-word, I'm grateful and I'm prayerful that we are reclaiming what it means to be evangelists, and that word is no longer an ugly word in the Episcopal Church. 5 years ago, I couldn't say evangelism when I was addressing Episcopal churches. I've worked with loads of churches, fully ecumenical, many denominations and non-denominations, and so I would always be mindful when serving an Episcopal church, and I would say, you know that E word? And everybody would shake their head and laugh. But now it's kind of, we've kind of reclaimed that. Thank God that we've reclaimed that word, because doing it really matters. Okay? So two more. Stop living in the past. Be adaptive. So one of the things that I'm a real fan of is adaptive leadership. Ronald Heifetz, a really smart dude from Harvard Business Review, who's written a lot of stuff. There's great books on it. And there's a fantastic book. If you haven't read it, especially clergy in the room, hi. I would highly recommend it. Any church nerds here who like to read kind of church leadership books, it's the book. It's called Canoeing the Mountains by Todd Bolsinger. And it parallels the adventures of Lewis and Clark. So you also learn a little bit of history while you're doing it, and how Lewis and Clark employed adaptive leadership. They were rivermen, and guess what? When they set forth trying to find the Northwest Passage, expecting to find the Pacific Ocean, what did they encounter? The Rocky Mountains. They were not hikers. They were not mountain men, but they forged ahead with the tools that they had and adapted to the new surroundings. So friends, the reality is that we are off map right now. We don't know what the new normal needs to be. So we have that wine, like that good wine, you've heard this illustration, or we've got the wine, but we do need to change the wine skin, the way we're packaging it. Jesus, the Holy Spirit, God, the Trinity is the wine. And we need to really reimagine what that wine skin needs to be. Okay? So keep that in mind. We need to adventure or die. Yeah.
What's the name of that book again?
Canoeing the Mountains by Todd Bolsinger. 1 D in Todd. T-O-D. All right. And last but not least, you need to trust the process. And the process is something that we're really going to be diving into in the second session. But trust it. It takes time.
This one is particularly astounding in its vigor. It can grow up to 1 meter a day, fast overtaking the other plants around it. The taller it grows, the faster its growth rate, so that in a matter of days it towers above the undergrowth and continues reaching for the sky. Not bad for what is essentially a grass. It's bamboo.
Friends, bamboo. Do you know what happens when you plant a seed for bamboo, or a little shoot of bamboo? What happens in 6 months? It's still a shoot. a year, it's still a shoot. It can take up to 3 to 4 years for a bamboo shoot to actually start to grow. And then it can grow 3 to 4 feet in 24 hours. That's crazy. The fact is that many people in church get the sense of urgency or they get anxious. Let's be real. Let's call it what it is. It's not necessarily urgency, it's anxiety. They plant some seeds, then they get anxious about it and wonder why it's not growing. And the fact is that they're not trusting the process. In order to change a culture, to change things around, to create a paradigm shift, culture change, it takes time. It takes a lot of effort and it takes patience. And like the bamboo, it can grow exponentially after years of germinating, or whatever that word is that Brian would know better than I, because he's an awesome gardener. Do you understand? So you need to trust the process. So next slide, I just wanted to include signs that your church might be going extinct. I think this is important for us to kind of realize, okay, here's where we're at, and here's what we can do about it. The signs your church is going extinct is that there is no sense of urgency. They're kind of good with where we're at. They kind of like where they're at. They understand and meet the needs of the people who are here, and just say, you know what, we're going to work with the people we have. Okay? That would be really no sense of urgency. The reality is that in any movement, there's always a sense of urgency. You know, you don't grow a movement unless there's a bit of spirit or fire under your derriere in order to go out and grow, right? So most people who want to create some type of movement are compelled or driven to do so. And so that lacks, or that has urgency. There's a sense of urgency, which is not meant to be confused with emergency. So that's kind of the inverse, right? By the way, this is taken from carrienewoff.com. These are not my words. I'm paraphrasing his bullets. So no sense of urgency is very, something that you might be an indicator. The next is urgency about the wrong things. We're urgent about our budget, and we're urgent about survival. So some churches will recognize, gosh, we really need to grow. We really need to grow, and attract people so that they can help us pay our bills. That's real, folks. And if that's you, then you should probably close your church tomorrow, because that's not sending the right thing. And the reality is that visitors or unchurched people who are approached in that way smell it out, and they understand it and recognize it as being inauthentic, that they're a means to an end, and not the right end, if that makes sense.
We had someone was able to say that if we only got 20 more families for $32.50 a week, we would be okay.
Wow.
So I suggested we change our banner outside the church and said, all are welcome here for $32.50 a week.
Wow.
We didn't get any takers.
That's poignant. That's real, though. So we have to examine our motivation and stop approaching things out of the spirit of scarcity and really start approaching things in a spirit of abundance. Decline has made you cautious. So growing churches take risks. Oftentimes when we're smaller, we want to conserve the assets and the resources that we have, and we're less likely to take risks. And that is a sign that you might be going extinct. You want to make sure that the resources you have, that you're able to take some risks. Because why? Risks pay off. Not all the time, but they do. And so oftentimes the growing churches are the ones who are stepping out on a limb a lot more than the ones who are not. Success has made you cautious. So sometimes, especially in little churches, we have great success. We might have an amazing event, that you're going to reflect on it and say that was amazing. We don't have to change anything up. And instead of being truly evaluative, you get a little bit high on your own pride and success, and you forget that, hey, we're still in this game. And so that's not necessarily a big one for me, but it's, Carrie Newhoff mentioned it, so I had to as well. Another one is affection for the past is greater than excitement for the future. Okay, friends, nostalgia is a dangerous thing in the church. It's a dangerous, dangerous thing. And so think about all the gifts and the assets that you do have and leverage those. Have you ever heard of an appreciative inquiry? It's a thing. It's where you're recognizing the good things that's going on and you're saying, how can we do more of it? Why are we good at it? How can we do more? So consider your assets and leverage them. You don't understand the changing culture. So a lot of people will lament that culture is changing and are slow to adapt or accommodate those changing needs. Funny thing, I've now used 3 videos in this presentation. And I had somebody come up and say, you're not the flavor of presenters that we typically have. Most people aren't using video. Now video, friends, is almost outdated. So we need to remember that. We need to be engaging folks in a way that meets them where they're at and what they're used to. Rather than, trying to just sit back and be what we want to be for our own comfort. We need to get a little uncomfortable in our own ways to meet folks where they're at and what they're used to. You don't have new leaders around the table. So this is another thing. I think the quote in this website is, if you have the same 5 leaders 5 years later, you're not 5 years better, you're just 5 years older. So you've got to make sure that you're incorporating some of our younger folks, and millennials need this. Millennials need to serve, they need to be embraced, and their energy, their creativity, and their passion needs to be harnessed. And so you want to make sure that you've got millennials and Gen Xers on your vestries. You mostly listen to the voices of current church members. This might be weird, but a lot of times when we're evaluating our own awesomeness, we're asking the people who are already a member, they're already a part of stuff. What about the community? What about the unchurched, or what about your visitors, the new people to the table? Are we getting their pulse? Are we getting their ideas, etc.? Your conflict is about all the wrong things. This is how what many call majoring in the minors and minoring in the majors. If we're arguing about things that just talk about operations and we're really not arguing about the big why and how we're moving our mission forward in the community on behalf of the ever-loving and living Jesus Christ, we're probably arguing about the wrong stuff. And any growth you have is transfer growth. So this is a big one, and I would say it might be one that you all should probably evaluate in this area. Because what I got from you is that a lot of people are already going to church, right? I can tell you though that this world's population is bigger than it's ever been. And there are plenty and plenty and plenty more people who are not churched, right? So we need to find that out. Respect our brothers, our ecumenical brothers and sisters. We don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul, literally. We don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul, but we do want to make sure that we're inviting and encouraging everyone to be a part of what this Jesus movement is all about. And last but not least, fundamentally unhealthy core team. So friends, this is where you all need to examine. Where are you at with your faith? When's the last time you felt real faith growth and development? How have you grown as a Jesus follower in the last 5 years? What are you doing to grow in your faith and in relationship to God? Those are some questions that you want to ask, because a good core team of leadership is a team that's growing personally and with one another.
So,
Yeah.
I can't sit on this anymore.
Yeah, bring it.
So, I even told him, if you want me to be an evangelist, forget it, I ain't never doing it. So now I sit here listening to this and realizing that change is always coming, and I like this whole process, trusting, but yet, the back part of me that has watched and is probably, I'm politically always wrong, I hate talking, but, I see people coming up and down the street, can I read to you today?
Oh,
And it's like, I'm not doing that.
that's not your
So how do you
flavor.
change?
That's not
this-
your
this-
flavor.
Yeah, and how, so how do you change,
Yeah.
become an evangelist without being,
Bible banging somebody over the head.
yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the approach?
Is-
Is that the approach that happens now? People come up to you?
What, no, I mean,
That's an approach.
yeah, I mean, you.
Right. I'm
don't
so
like
glad
to
you
say
brought
they're
this up.
religion, but you always see these people out there
Yeah.
walking the streets, reading the Bibles, and you're like,
Yeah, I love that you brought this up. Thank you for being courageous enough to say that in front of everybody, because I think it's important. Everybody's gonna have their own flavor of what evangelism is. And evangelism literally means sharing. You know, it's going out and sharing. Sharing your faith, but it's not necessarily meaning that you are intentionally engaging one another in conversation in order to convert someone. I don't believe that. I think we as Episcopalians have our own, what's that, what's the, Michael Curry's thing, we have our own accent. You know, like we are a part of the Christian movement, the Jesus movement of the Episcopal branch, and we have the Episcopal kind of accent. So we need to do it in ways that feels right for us and natural to us, and let it just be an extension of who we authentically are. So I don't know that we're ready to evangelize if we're not growing in our own faith, if we're not reading the Bible, if we're not prayerful.
One thing that may be helpful is that, was it St. Francis said, evangelize, and if all else fails, use words.
Yeah, sure.
And so just thinking about you, Darren, I mean, you have gifts that you share with me and with many people, just with the type of work that you do
Right.
and services that you provide. And
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different ways to, evangelize people just by,
Yeah.
other-
I've been in the grocery store and getting at the checkout, and I just casually, just in regular conversation, oh yeah, our cute little church up there by the hospital, you know, we're having coffee hour, and ooh, it looks like this, oh, that's the friendliest little
Sure.
church ever, you know, that's
all my filters are.
all you gotta say, you
That's
know,
it.
it's just a conversation.
That's
It's
it.
not-
And meeting people where they're at. If they have a need, and by providing for their need, that might be evangelism.
Yeah.
So I'm not necessarily saying that y'all need to go preach at the corner with a Bible, you know, standing on the Bible. Tom.
There's also really good curriculums that we could do as a church, like Invite, Welcome, Connect.
Yeah.
That would be really, that would help us kind of identify
That's
how
right.
we can be evangelists personally
That's right.
and as a church.
I actually am gonna quote, I'm gonna reference Mary Palmer. Yes.
And, I told them the lady at the window in McDonald's said, I haven't seen you before. Are you new to Spencer? And I said, yeah, I'm actually new to Iowa. She said, have you found a church yet?
Wow.
My husband had been here beforehand. He was attending here, so I knew where we were going. And then she handed me the church business card.
Wow.
Said,
Come and
if
see.
you have not, come and see.
Love it. Wow. That's bold. And you know what? That's not rude. That's not rude, y'all. That's just, you know, that's recognizing a new face to the community and being invitational. It's not presumptuous. It's not offensive. Because you could have just left and whatever. I think that's fantastic. There's another church, I know another church that I worked with when I was in New Canaan in Connecticut. They grew their church almost like 30% in 3 or 4 years because they checked out the what's it called? Any realtors in here? What's it called? The multiple, yes, MLS. They would check the MLS listings and they would handwrite letters welcoming them to the community and talking about how great their church is and just telling them we'd love to see you. So they got a listing, a report of the MLS closures, and within a week of people moving to their new home, they got a handwritten note from folks, not the rector, not the clergy, members of the church, just inviting people, and they could say now, today, over 35% of the active membership came because they received a letter.
Whoa.
Wow, right? It worked. So I saw one more hand.
So now I've forgotten it because I'm so excited about
Oh,
that.
shoot. So all right, so trust the process. What's the process? So I've got about, how much time do I have?
She remembered.
I remembered.
10 more minutes. Okay, go ahead.
So I know Bishop Curry's doing this whole Jesus movement
Yeah.
thing, and Tom went to a conference.
Evangelism matters.
Yes.
That Evangelism Matters. Has he come out with any literature or videos or anything about like different types of evangelism? Because I'm with Darren, like, you know, in college.
I think we might have to write that book.
Because I saw,
Different
college
types.
people would evangelize. And
Flavors of evangelism. I love it. Well, if not, how about this? I promise the ECF will write a white page for it within the next month.
Sweet.
Sound good?
Yeah.
I'm on that for sure. Yes.
But, I also am not the one to have comfort level in reaching out necessarily all the time. However, I think that as our church, we need to support the people that have that comfort level. So when they do come in, we can take it from there and we can say, welcome, here we are, we're
Yeah.
glad you're here, we can do that because we might not be the ones to bring them in the door, but
You're
we
right.
need to keep them.
But it's a concerted and
Feeling good.
strategic and intentional effort on behalf of the entire community. So let's talk more about this. So let's talk about integral pieces of the process. What do you need to trust? The first thing that every church really needs is a clear and compelling vision with strategic next steps. And that's often the stuff that's missing. Most churches can say we have a mission statement. Most churches can say, yeah, we might have a tagline or a cool vision statement. Most churches can say, yeah, this is where we're going, or this is the end all. Not all. Most. Many. Maybe not even most. Many churches, should I say. So you need a vision statement, but you also then need steps. You need strategic steps to start giving your vision traction. Right? So you need goals, and you need next steps. And it's the next steps is what gives your goals traction and legs. It helps you achieve your vision, right? You need to understand, you need understood and defined core values. So the thing about core values, friends, is this: you have them. You have them. They're what drive you. It's the spirit through which you achieve anything. It's how you do ministry. You just have to determine what they are to be able to name them and to define them so that newcomers might understand, okay, this is how we do things. That's what a value is. It's the spirit in which you go about business. Okay? Values do matter, and values are not always healthy, by the way. Your core values are not always good. And just because you say that a value is something, it might not necessarily be core. It might be aspirational. Okay? Attendance tracking process, attendance process and tracking. I put tracking twice in there. This is super important and something that the Episcopal Church is not always awesome at. We're really good at counting heads, but we hardly and rarely know who. This is really important, not just for children and youth, and this is everybody. We need to know who's in the pews. That rhymes. Who's in the pews? I love that. I'm gonna have to say that again. We need to know the who behind the head, right? And at the end of the day, a lot of people will say, well, I don't know, we're a small church. I don't think we need to be, worried about or concerned about numbers. It's not about numbers. And oftentimes when people say that, that's an excuse. Because I'm pretty sure Jesus was a numbers guy. He counted. And not only did he count, he knew when the one went astray, and he went after it. Okay? So we as churches not need to just count the heads. We need to know the who behind it. And we can't do that unless we're actually taking attendance. And by attendance, I mean names. The Presbyterians and the Methodists, they have something called the friendship pad that they pass along the pews. Some creative and innovative Episcopal churches are doing things like prayer cards that every single week, every person is expected to write down who they are and a prayer. And the rector commits to praying for every single person who fills out a pew card. That's just one way. You might have your own way. But taking attendance and tracking it is super important because it helps your entire parish know who have stopped coming. It's just a pastoral care thing. We cannot be the people who just wait and deal with the people we have. I'm going to use an illustration of a friend of mine who also speaks on this. His name's Mark, his wife Susan, they have 3 kids, and he pretends that this is an actual true story. He's like, we went to Disney World, and Adam, Susan, and Lee wanted to do all different things. And so we decided that we were going to let them do their thing, and then we were going to meet back at the flagpole at 9 o'clock. Everybody agreed that they would be at that flagpole at 9 o'clock, so they broke and they went back. Well, 9 o'clock comes by, Adam, Susan, Lee, and Debbie are there, but no Adam. And so Mark says, all right, Susan, let's go. It's 9 o'clock, we're heading out. Susan, the mom, goes, what do you mean? We can't head out, we don't have all our kids. And he's like, gosh, I don't know why it's always about numbers with you. And she's like, but Mark, he's our kid. And he's like, well, why don't we just work with the ones we've got? These are perfectly fine kids. Well, you know, we'll just. And she's like, but don't you get it? They're ours, like Adam's ours. So that's the thing, friends. We need to be able to keep track and know who is ours and pursue them when they go astray. You can't do that without an attendance tracking process. New visitors process, see, invite, welcome, connect. Y'all, you should have a process for when people come through the door so that you're not attacking them in grateful, like, oh, yay, we're growing. You know, we can't do that. We can't smother them. We can't like freak them out a little bit, but we do need to have a really good process to not just invite and welcome, but connect. We want to make sure that they can engage in the community, and really that's all about closing the back door. It's about embracing them. You know, welcome is fine, inviting is fine, but how can we embrace them so that they feel like they're a part and fully integrated in life of the church? An MIA follow-up plan. So when you have an attendance tracking plan, what about those members who do step away? Do they feel like they've been cared for? Because oftentimes when they go missing and nobody follows up, what's the motivation in coming back if they don't feel like they've been a valued member of the church, that people don't care or notice that they're not there, right? So you need to have a process in place for that. And you need a communications plan. How are you engaging people in this loud, busy world with everything just being shouted at them? In what ways are you communicating? Which is a two-way street. So do the people at your church, have they been able to communicate to the church, this is how we like to be engaged? Is it texting, email? Website is not a form of communication, y'all. That is for visitors. Most of y'all probably not checking the website because you're already in, right? So think about that. And you also need strategic branding. That might sound crazy, but you need it. How is your church being recognized? And what do people expect when they walk in the door? Do you have a very clear brand that there's a heart-head connection that people associate you with? For what are you known? And last but not least, you need humble clergy and bold lay leadership. Because it's not their job. Their job is sacramental in nature, right? But Jesus didn't die to put them in charge or to make them boss. I'm just saying. Jesus died so that we could all be included in this heavenly work and growing the kingdom. So we need to reclaim our authority in ministry and start doing the work of ministry, because we are all legitimate ministers of the word. Okay? Any questions? Yes.
Mine's more of a comment. The bamboo part gives me hope.
Oh, good. I hope the message of the gospel is what's at the root of that bamboo, because that is hope enough, friends. Jesus is hope enough, so we need to trust in that. I have a lot of other turn and discuss questions, and I'm going to be spending time with anybody else who wants to kind of pursue any of this and go deeper. But any other questions before I get ready for Brian?